guys, it's Sarah. You're probably noticing Mr. Corrigan isn't here to sing the podcast theme music this week. Well, that's because we invited former Cristo Rey social studies teacher, Dr. Deibel, onto the show today. If you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you know that between Mr. Corrigan and Dr. Deibel, there's lots of drama.
Drama!
You gotta stop with that.
Anyway, there are mortal enemies, even though Dr. Deibel is the original founder of the podcast, so Mr. Corrigan is hiding in some hole someplace this week. But despite Mr. Corrigan's immaturity, the show must go on. Pure, give us the intro.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Cristo Rey podcast. I'm your host, Pure, and I'm here with...
Diary.
And Cesar.
And today we have a very special guest who needs no introduction, Dr. Deibel.
Hey everybody, how we doing?
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So yeah, my name is Zach Deibel. I guess Dr. Deibel, but you really don't have to call me that. I taught at Cristo Rey for 4 years, from 2016 to 2020. Cristo Rey was kind of part of my extended journey to becoming a professor, which I am now. But I got my master's before I went to Cristo Rey in history, so I started some of my research there. And then after my 4 years at Cristo Rey, I went on to Binghamton University, which is in upstate New York, where I earned my PhD in history. And now I am a professor of history. I do early American history at Virginia Military Institute. So it's a small liberal arts military college in Lexington, Virginia. Just started this year. This is my first full-time faculty appointment. But I was teaching at Binghamton while I was finishing up my doctorate as well. So I've had a few years now of teaching at the college level. But yeah, my original kind of place was in the 912 classroom, teaching AP Gov and US history and all that good stuff, working with the esteemed honorary Dr. Corrigan with all of that at Cristo Rey.
Do you like Virginia? I mean, I heard it's a beautiful place over there.
Yeah, so we're like right in the heart of the Shenandoah Valley, basically about an hour west of Charlottesville, which is where the University of Virginia is, and then about 45 minutes north of Roanoke. So we're kind of in the mountains, really nice. But it was a little bit of an adjustment. My wife and I moved down here from New York, so definitely a different place, but a really nice place to be.
That's nice. I know how beautiful Virginia is. I heard it's absolutely wonderful, and being close to Roanoke and the mountains is absolutely amazing though.
Yeah, there's a lot of good hiking. Shenandoah National Park is like half hour from our front door, so it's pretty great. What
inspired you to be a professor? What inspired you to go on to do your PhD and all?
I really kind of had a winding path. Like I said, I started teaching high school. I taught in Arkansas for 3 years before I went to Cristo Rey. And I really loved teaching high school social studies and history. But I think really starting in undergrad, I had a lot of really great early professors who encouraged me to kind of keep up the research side of things. So I would do kind of independent research projects, some various publications while I was teaching high school. And then when I got my master's at Arkansas State, my advisor there, kind of encouraged me you might want to go for your PhD one day, but, stay teaching, stay what you're doing. If you love what you're doing, keep doing it. And so that's how I ended up at Cristo Rey. I went to a Jesuit high school, and I always knew about the Cristo Rey network. And I always thought it was a really cool model. So I applied for the history position kind of on a whim. I had no real connection to Columbus or anything like that. So I kind of just showed up with all the stuff I could fit in my car and started teaching in Columbus in 2016. And I really did love it. It was one of those kind of situations where I felt like if I didn't leave when I did, I probably would have never left, which I would have been a terrific choice as well. I really loved working at Cristo Rey and teaching high school. But there was a piece of kind of the scholarly side of things and the research side of things that I always wanted to keep doing. And it's just harder to do that while you're teaching high school. So as I was pursuing my PhD, I always knew I wanted to end up in a more teaching focused professor role. And so that's why I was looking at more liberal arts, kind of smaller college jobs when I finished, because I love teaching in that environment where you have a lot of close connections with students, smaller class sizes, much more similar to what you would get in a high school. So, as much as I've really been passionate about my research, I also wanted to maintain the passion about my teaching. So.
Hey guys, it's Jade. This week is the third full week of Lent. Here's Miss Yelich with a special reflection for the week.
During Lent, many people give up things such as chocolate. And while this is certainly good,
there are other ways that we can grow deeper in our faith during Lent. We live in an age of distractions everywhere. We're constantly occupied with something that takes away our attention, our phones and TV, emails, and all sorts of things. This Lent might be a good time to take this challenge and get rid of some of those distractions, the necessary ones, and be mindful. When we are mindful, it will allow more time for us to pray to God. And when we pray to God, we will hear His voice and we will know what we need to do, what God is calling each one of us to do during this Lent. It is also going to be a good practice because it will allow us to see those around us clearer, and it will give us an opportunity to help people who are in need, who we might not notice due to all these distractions that I've mentioned. So please take some time during this Lent to just be mindful. Pray to God and see where God leads you and where God calls you to go and what God calls you to do.
So going a little bit back to Cristo Rey, what motivated you to do the podcast?
So first of all, Mr. Corrigan gives me too much credit, as per usual. The podcast idea kind of was born out of student government at the time. So we had a really kind of tight-knit, ambitious group of seniors that year, and we were all sent home for COVID. We were all put into kind of lockdown and isolation, and we knew most likely that the school year was over for all intents and purposes in terms of in-person instruction. So the student government, we still had a lot on our docket. We had some, town halls we wanted to do. We had some speakers coming. We had prom and like everything that, you do as a senior in high school, and we couldn't do any of it. So we started to kind of meet informally on Zoom to try to figure out what are some things we can do. We hosted a virtual dance on Zoom where we played like a bunch of music. Mr. Wynn DJ'd for us. I don't know. He's coaching the soccer team now, I think, but he and I are good friends, and he DJ'd a dance on Zoom, which was very fun. But we did a lot of kind of things like that. And one of the projects that we worked on was the podcast, to just kind of give us a chance to meet and talk, put something out there. Hopefully students who listened, could hear some familiar voices. It also served a really important like civic purpose. Now that I look back on it, I mean, I am just some background. I study basically the origin of civic institutions during the American Revolution, specifically looking at like learning and knowledge in schools and education. And it's funny because now I look back on it, and that's really what we were doing, is building kind of a civic program, in the sense that, a lot of folks didn't know where to get reliable information about what was going on. I mean, we were all in our houses. We didn't know a lot about COVID at the time. And we ended up having, at the time, the nurse who was with us had some connections with various healthcare professionals. So we would have them on to give tips about how to stay safe. We had some mental health conversations about, avoiding depression or counteracting depression in this time. We had some political discussions about, how to sort through fake news and things like that. So it kind of started as this almost utilitarian, like it had a purpose. It wasn't just like, for fun in that sense. And I think it's cool how you guys have really ran with that as kind of a program that helps build school culture, because we were trying to do that in a place where we had a lot of demand for culture, but we didn't have a school, right? We didn't have a school building. So we, at the time at least, so we had to kind of build that out. We also did some podcast projects in APUS government, and Mr. Corrigan was part of those too. So we had a little bit of like institutional knowledge of how to do a podcast, but for this particular product, it was really born from that kind of like desire to build a school community in a virtual sense when we were all so separated. So yeah, that's kind of this. And again, all of that was basically I didn't do any of it. It was all the students who ran the show. I was just there to help them make it happen. I feel like now it must be so funny when we do those little snippets, because like nobody knows who I am. So you're probably like, who is this crazy guy who sends in recordings every 6 months?
That's crazy, because I remember the first time when I actually saw this special, and that was the first time I ever like heard that Mr. Deibel, and I was like, who's that? And I had to get like a whole history of like who he was, and I was like, oh.
I think the first time I saw you was in the Columbus Dispatch. There was like an interview thing, and I saw it like in a video, and that's how I knew about the school too.
Huh. Very cool. Didn't they come like interview us about, I think it was when like Qasem Soleimani was assassinated in Iran or something? Wild. Well, who would have thought the assassination of a senior Iranian military leader would have brought Cesar to Cristo Rey Columbus?
That is a turn of events.
I mean, what can we say?
Everything's connected.
That's history for you.
Yeah.
I think that's also how I met Mr. Corrigan's son.
Yeah, how is it having Corrigan Jr. there?
Corrigan Jr.
Corrigan.
I'm going to literally say that he is an amazing singer and literally a good. When it comes to like acting, he's literally the best. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like kid has some talent.
Yeah.
Well, he must have inherited some from his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually scary.
Hi guys, it's Paris. During Women's History Month, we often reflect on the great women of the past. But what about the women and girls who are making history today?
Hi, my name is Yasmin and I'm a freshman. And my experience on the wrestling team was really nice. It felt really good doing something for the school, especially as like the first girl on the team. It was hard at first because I can't really practice with the guys, but over the time, just practicing and keep on doing it, it went well. I was the first girl to compete and also win. I won my first match during sectionals, the girls sectionals, and I was really proud at that moment because I had worked really hard to win my first match. It was hard at first, but over time it got easy and it was a really fun thing to do. And I'm glad that I got to be part of the wrestling team, and I hope that more girls next year join the wrestling team because it's such a fun experience.
From being in time of Cristo Rey, what was like your favorite part of teaching there?
Wow. I mean, I think that's such a hard question because it would probably be, everything. But I think that one of the things, and it actually serves me well now in my role here at VMI, there is a value, I think, to a school that has a mission that is beyond just kind of self-serving outcomes, right? So like a lot of I went to a big R1 public university. R1 means it's like research focused university for my PhD. And, you can tell when you're on that kind of a campus. I mean, not that there's anything, bad about those kinds of schools, right? Ohio State has a huge culture and a huge presence in Columbus, for example. But it's an institution that exists for like everybody's individual advancement, right? You go there to get a good education so you can get a good job and you can move forward. It's kind of like a self-serving enterprise, which is good. That's what it's for. But what I loved about teaching at Cristo Rey is that whether you're a student or a teacher or a volunteer or a work study partner, everybody's kind of helping build something together as a community, right? You're building a school that stands for broadly that level of like community exchange and interaction. And I think that it showed in my classes, right? Students were bought into that culture and, running student government and coaching and doing other things outside of just the classroom. I was able to see that with my students, that they actually cared about, what was going on at the school. And, they cared enough to protest things. They cared enough to petition for rules changes and stuff like that. So now that I'm at VMI, which has a really strong institutional mission in terms of preparing cadets for military service through their undergraduate education and like having them go through a liberal arts curriculum like any other liberal arts university, I've really benefited from having sort of been in that environment for a while now. So I think the general sense of community and how everyone's kind of bought into the mission and cares about the school, it's something that in the moment, I'm sure you will all think is very like, that's just how our school is and it's kind of your day to day. But when you leave and you go to your university, chances are you're going to notice some of those differences, right? It's a little bit of a different vibe, I guess, or at a place like Cristo Rey, where you have such a tight-knit community. So I think that was probably my favorite part about teaching. Diary, Pierre, and Cesar, what grade are you guys in?
I'm a senior this year, which is kind of scary. I like Cristo Rey. I'm scared to go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a junior, and for Cesar as well.
I think I can talk for myself, but yeah, I'm a junior too.
Cool. Yeah. All right. So so the juniors, you guys have Mr. Corrigan in class right now, right? You're in U.S. history. Is that still the case?
No, that was the last year. Sophomore year, we had Mr. Corrigan.
Okay. And so now you're in government?
In government.
Yep.
So that's what I used
Very
to teach. I
miscellaneous.
did government. That was my before. I don't know who it is now. Who's your government teacher now?
Ms. Alina.
Oh
She's
yeah,
great.
okay. Miss Lemus. Yeah, she's great. Very cool. Yeah. So that was my when I was there, Miss Lemus did world history, Mr. Corrigan did US, and I did Gov. So that was our department for the last 2 years there. Where do you guys work? Where are your work study jobs?
So I work at Nationwide Insurance. I actually worked there for now 3 years, including the summer. So
Happy anniversary.
yeah, they know me pretty well.
That's great. That's a great placement.
I work at the Ohio Department of Youth.
And I work at the Ohio Department of Commerce. I've been there all 4 of my years. They absolutely love me.
And you're humble about it too, right, Pierre?
Oh, yes. of course.
Yeah, no, that's great. Those are all great jobs. You will have a leg up in the next phase because even in grad school, I felt like there were so many of my fellow students who like had never had a real job, right? They were all just like, they went from college to grad school and they, they'd be like, oh, I can't believe I have to do this reading. It's like, you don't even know what work is. So you guys have had to balance so much. It definitely puts you ready to, enact that discipline. Do any of you have Miss Greenlee as your work study sponsor?
But I love Miss Greenlee.
Yeah.
Oh, she's
So she was
amazing.
my student long ago.
Oh, my
AP.
goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she was president of student council when I ran student council. So Miss Greenlee and I worked closely together. She's great.
Heck yeah. Full circle.
And Miss Muchler, I coached with her. Obviously, Mr. Corrigan and I were attached at the hip. Who else? Mr. Wynn, he and I were pretty close. But yeah, I mean, it's cool to see that there's a lot of folks still there holding down the fort. But you guys have a really great group. Everybody there is really great. Miss Abels and I were part of the leadership team together.
Hi guys, it's Vivian. Right before spring break, the entire Cristo Rey community celebrated Mass at the St. Joseph Cathedral. Afterwards, Cristo Rey Columbus presented the annual Milk Shot Award. The Milk Shot Award is the highest honor that Cristo Rey Columbus can bestow upon a person who has significantly contributed to our school's community. This year's recipients were the Williams family and the Kirk Williams Company. J.K. Williams, now Secretary and Treasurer Emeritus of the Kirk Williams Company, got involved with CRC very early on. The company advised us as we renovated our Town Street school building, and Mr. Williams formalized his involvement by joining both our Board of Trustees and our Professional Work Study Program Board. The involvement in Cristo Rey Columbus spread among the family, with 3 generations of Williams attending our events and making gifts to support our school over the years. The combined effort of these individuals and their company has made them one of the school's largest contributors. Thank you, Williams family and the Kirk Williams Company, for your enduring support of Cristo Rey Columbus.
What other extracurriculars do you guys do besides podcasts?
So
Well, I'm a proud actor inside of our drama club.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and I'm also in the drama club, but I'm also in choir, so that's another thing.
Yeah, that too.
Nice.
You're also in choir.
Yeah, that too.
Ooh. And I'm on the, I don't know if it's recent or but I'm in the EA Sports team.
Well, it's cool. That's funny because I don't think did we have a drama club when I was there?
Not a drama club. It was new this year. A
Yeah.
freshman started it. It's great.
That's cool. I'm glad that you guys have some of those outlets. It's awesome because, when Mr. Corrigan was there before me, but when I started my first year, we were still figuring things out. So it's cool to see that, we would always joke about when are we going to be a real school, right? And it seems like you guys are definitely that and more, which is awesome. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for building a great culture.
For
thank
building
you.
the kingdom. That's another one of our things this year.
But anyway, and so yeah, Pierre, you're a senior. Do you know what's on the horizon yet? Are you still waiting on hearing back from applications and stuff like that?
Yeah, I applied to 8 colleges so far, and I'm mostly playing the waiting game.
Well, I know that's a crazy, stressful time. So I went to American University in Washington, D.C. I originally went thinking I was going to do like international studies and go work for the State Department and do politics and all that. But I just really loved history. So I ended up majoring in history and minoring in international studies. And then after I finished undergrad, I did Teach for America, which is a federal program basically putting folks who want to be teachers into high need areas. So I was in kind of the middle of the Arkansas Delta, so the Mississippi River Valley, basically in Northeast Arkansas, a very small town, teaching there for 3 years. And then that's what I did before I went to. And while I was there, I got my master's at Arkansas State University. And then obviously went to Columbus and then Binghamton.
Cool beans.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for anyone trying to get a PhD?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really strange world, academia and like higher education. When you are thinking about, your career path, depending on what you want to do, there are a lot of opportunities in higher education beyond just your undergrad that can help prepare you for that. So like, I'm sure most people are familiar with law school or med school, and getting a PhD is essentially, I hesitate to say it's the same because it isn't. It's very different. My caveats include things like your pay will be significantly lower than if you become a lawyer or a doctor. But a PhD, the kind of philosophy behind it, if you will, is that you are trying to achieve what's called a terminal degree in your field. What that means is that there's no higher certification or level of like achievement beyond your terminal degree. So when you have a PhD in history or a PhD in computer science, right, you have the highest level of training in that discipline itself. When you get like a JD, a Juris Doctor, or a MD, a medical doctorate, those are degree programs that are designed to like practically prepare you to be in that very highly specialized professional field. So it's not, better or worse across the board. It's just that they are different kinds of programs, right? A PhD is a doctor in philosophy. So like I actually have a doctorate in philosophy. It's just that I like focused on history. But it's the idea that you have like the most training and knowledge in that area from like an intellectual standpoint. So that's great because the process of getting a PhD, you learn so much. I mean, it basically was, I went through it in 4 years. Typically it's a little longer than that, but I went in with my master's already. So I was able to cut out some of the coursework. But generally it'll take you 5 to 7 years to earn a PhD. And it is really time devoted to spending a lot of time reading and thinking and writing and sort of becoming an expert in your field. And I certainly wouldn't cast myself as some grand expert, but the process of having to like really just focus on learning for the sake of learning, right? It's not like, you're in history class where you have to turn in some assignments and achieve a certain standard and get grades. It's more of like, can you have an intellectual conversation with other historians about the past, right? And this is obviously in the context of history, and every program is different.
Hi guys, it's Ashley. This weekend Ramadan ends with the celebration of Eid. Here's Miriam, class of 2027, to explain more.
Eid al-Fitr is a big holiday that comes right after Ramadan. It's a celebration to mark the end of fasting and all the hard work we did during the month. On Eid, we start the day with a special prayer at the mosque, and we thank Allah for helping us through Ramadan. It's also a time for family and friends. We wear nice clothes, give gifts, and eat a lot of good food. There's also a tradition of giving charity called Zakat al-Fitr to help those in need. Eid is all about gratitude, joy, and spending time with the people you care about.
But then there are other tracks so that's a PhD in like the humanities. That's kind of what you would see. But then you can get like a PhD in public policy, right? In those cases, those ones are more like research focused. So if you go get a PhD in political science, you're going to look at like an actual policy agenda and research it. You might make prescriptions, right? For humanities PhDs, we publish a dissertation at the end that is basically our kind of contribution to the body of historical knowledge. So my dissertation looked at how learning and education in a broad kind of social and political sense were really key parts of both the colonization specifically in New York, but also the American Revolution becomes this kind of contest over systems of learning and development in the colonies. So like in that case, I'm making a contribution to scholarship around the American Revolution. So that's kind of what like getting a PhD is, right? You're trying to achieve that terminal degree to make a contribution to the field that you study. So whether it's a policy-oriented one, whether it's in the humanities, whether it's wherever you might fall in your PhD program, that's what you're essentially trying to achieve. You're trying to, and in that case, my advisor kind of compared it when you're in med school. The first half of med school is you learn all the stuff to be a doctor, and then you have a residence, right? You go somewhere and you are a resident doctor before you become a full independent doctor. You're a resident in a program at a hospital or a university hospital system. For getting a PhD, your coursework all the way through what's called your comprehensive exams, sometimes it's called your qualifying exams. That's sort of the first part. The residency is like writing your dissertation, because it's like you basically earn the rank of being a historian, and then now you have to go make something that shows that you are a historian. And that something you make is your dissertation, which is your research into all the archives and coming up with an argument, an original thesis for what you're trying to say. So in typical fashion, I have gone on way too long about all of that, but that's kind of philosophically what getting a PhD is.
Because you mentioned thesis, what is a thesis and how does it work?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the terminology, depending on your program. Some programs will call it a thesis, others will call it a dissertation, right? Mine was a dissertation. But it's essentially asking you to come up with a new idea about, in my case, history. You're coming up with an idea that you think is important to understand about a specific topic or region or area or something like that. So in my case, it was the fact that I felt like the American Revolution, in kind of its many, many histories that people have written, but also if you look at the actual sources from the conflict itself, that there is this character to it where you have two different or multiple different sides trying to kind of teach people about what being like a good citizen and what good government looks like. So I saw it almost as this kind of political education that's taking place in the American Revolution. And historians generally didn't apply that framework because the argument is, well, we don't really have defined systems of education in the United States at that time or in colonial America. But my point is, if we think about it more as the broad kind of social process of learning, then it makes more sense. So you're coming up with kind of your idea, and really it starts with a question, right? You can't approach a dissertation with the answer already in mind, right? The goal, especially as a historian, is to say, in my case, it was, I wonder what role, if any, the idea of teaching and learning played in the politics that surround the American Revolution. So then I had to go to archives across New York State, the New York State Archives in Albany, the New York Historical Society in New York City. I go on these research trips to dig through these old boxes of documents that nobody has looked at in forever, right? You do that research, you look at old maps and old letters and diaries and logbooks and all these different things. You collect all your evidence. And then you look at the evidence and you see, okay, what is the evidence telling me about this question that I have? You're also asking, what have other historians said? Because you might be answering the question in a way that promotes conversation with other historians. So part of it is to say, all these people have written about the American Revolution. I've done this research and I think they're right about all the stuff they're saying in these ways. But I think there's this one thing that I want to add to that conversation. And that's really what your dissertation is trying to do, is what are you adding to the conversation? One of my advisors, the kind of metaphor he used is, if you picture like a mosaic, right, which is like a big painting with all different tiles in it, right? It's like ancient Greek mosaics, you think of those. And what's your little tile that you're putting in the painting, right, in the mosaic? What is your little tile going to do? Right? If you have like a cityscape, if that's the picture, are you adding a cloud or are you adding a nuclear bomb falling from the sky, right? Are you trying to say, what is it that you're trying to say, and what impact is it going to have on the way we see the larger historical picture? And so those are the questions that drive your dissertation or your research project.
Hi guys, it's Natalia. Last month, the entire school participated in a presentation by Birdie Light. Birdie Light is an organization that was founded by Beth Weinstock after losing her son to fentanyl. Birdie Light goes around to schools, churches, youth groups, health fairs, etc., and educate young people about the dangers of fentanyl. What I really like about the presentation was that it allowed us to process the seriousness of the situation, but it wasn't as serious that it felt uncomfortable being in the room. Another thing that I really enjoyed was that it gave us access to more information on what's going on with fentanyl, and also it helped us understand, I guess, the myths of what we hear like in social media, those kind of platforms related to fentanyl. Another thing that I really liked is how passionate she is about it, and she shows that she actually wants to make a difference in people's life and actually wants to share this information and doesn't want anyone else to get affected by fentanyl.
I know that the original question was about like, why do grad school or whatever? And I just wanted to speak to that for one moment. As like high schoolers, one of the things that I encourage folks to think about is that you're likely to have to go more than just a bachelor's degree at some point in your life, right? Maybe not a degree program, but you're going to have some form of professional training. You might go get an MBA, which is a master's of business administration, right? A lot of people go get an MBA to become basically like managers in their companies. Remember that when you're an undergrad, right? You don't have to have every single answer to everything you want to know in those 4 years. There's a lot of opportunities to do postgraduate work where you figure a lot of that stuff out. And the other piece of that is like, you want to make sure that if you do go into graduate school or you do pursue some of that stuff, make sure that it's what you're on fire for, right? One of my advisors had this advice for me too, and I think it was really useful, is, you're not going to be, especially if you go down the road of academia, the paycheck isn't going to match your friends who are getting their MBAs and doing all these like big fancy corporate jobs. Your time is going to be very different, right? So if you're really passionate about what you're trying to study or what you're trying to learn, then it will be very rewarding. But it's also, you have to find what it is that's rewarding to you. So I don't say lightly like, yeah, everybody should go get a PhD in history, because and I don't mean that condescendingly either. It's just, if it's something that really drives you and you're super curious about these questions, this is a great pathway. If it's something that, you want to explore, that's what kind of undergrad is for, a history major or an English major that allows you to dive into that field. And maybe you get enough out of that experience, and that's great. But just graduate school is a little bit about that space where you become really passionate about something and you explore it because you feel like you really have to, right? That's kind of how I see graduate school and how I encourage folks to think about it, because I know a lot of folks who think, well, I'll just go to this degree program and get a master's or something, and they feel unfulfilled because it's not like fully what they were really passionate about. So just as a little aside about that.
Hi guys, it's Liam. Every year, a school in the Cristo Rey network is chosen to hold a gathering of leaders from all 39 Cristo Rey schools for several days of collaboration, professional development, and community. This year, the host school is Cristo Rey Columbus. That's us. Next week, from April 1st through April 4th, school leaders from around the country will be here to see what amazing things Cristo Rey Columbus has to offer. If you see anyone from one of these other Cristo Reys, think of them as sort of like our Cristo Rey cousins. Let's treat them like a family with a warm Columbus welcome.
As seniors approaching like college level, do you have any advice for us?
Remember that when you are pursuing your dreams or your goals, that there is always a balance between passion and discipline. So I see a lot of students who are really, really passionate and like want to go change the world and want to be amazing doctors or politicians or teachers or social workers, right? They're really passionate about their goals and their dreams in life, which is great. And I'm so glad that someone has nurtured those passions. But passion without the discipline side of things loses its ability to actually have an impact, right? And you have to remember you have to eat your vegetables, right? You have to manage your time. You have to think about how you're going to get things done, have a planner, set your schedule, right? Those are the nuts and bolts of excellence start there. So if you want to really achieve those goals about which you are passionate, and you should be passionate, remember that discipline is a huge piece of actually making that happen. On the flip side, discipline without passion is going to lead you to not be particularly happy, right? You can be an amazing college student and you can turn in everything on time and do exactly what the professor asks and follow along. But if you're doing all of that in service of something that you're not passionate about, it won't be meaningful to you. So, I always encourage students that it's a balance between those two things, passion and discipline, that they have to go hand in hand. And usually in the best situations, they reinforce one another, right? It's easier to be disciplined about something you love. And just, when I was at Cristo Rey and coached track and cross country, I did distance running. And that's, distance running has a lot of life lessons in it. But if you really love, think about any sport you play or extracurricular that you do, practicing your instrument or going to baseball practice or whatever it might be, those things are discipline, but they don't feel like work because you care so much about it, but you're still disciplined in doing it. And remember that when you get to college, because you have an opportunity to really apply your passion and your discipline in new and exciting ways that can really help you achieve those goals that you have. And, that's what we all want. We want you guys to go set the world aflame with your passions and your interests and all the dreams that you have. So just remember that those two things in tandem are really important.
Thank you for being here with us and teaching us and giving us advice.
Thank you for taking the time to at least talk to us. And of course, I know being a professor, either there's a lot of things you have to do or sometimes it's a free
No, it's great to be here. It's super fun to have a chance to talk with Cristo Rey students. I feel like there's still a part of me, my past self floating around the building there. And I'm so glad that things are going well and you guys are keeping the tradition going and once a cougar, always a cougar. As they said when I was there.
Now we say Cougars climb.
Cougars climb. I like it.
So thanks again for being with us today and taking the time with us. Thank you all guys for watching, and we'll see you next on the Cristo Rey podcast.
Bye.
Podcast, Cristo Rey podcast, Cristo Rey podcast, blah, 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 blah.
Stop the music, stop the music, stop the music.
Mr. Corrigan. Great to see you.
Okay. It's one thing to come on the Cristo Rey podcast as a guest. Fine. But to sing the Cristo Rey podcast theme song, that's my thing, pal.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Of course.
Thank you. Golly. Okay, gotta warm up a little bit. This is the intro part, and then here it comes, Wait, stop the music. Why are you being so nice to me?
I'm always nice to you.
What? No, you're always coming on the podcast trying to do terrible things to me. Don't you remember?
I do not recall. Could you think of any examples?
Examples? Well, one time you came at me with a real functioning lightsaber.
I do not recall that incident. When are you alleging this takes place?
Cristo Rey Podcast, Season 2, Episode 1.
Wait, do you know the exact episode number?
And then, one Christmas, you slid down my chimney dressed as Santa Claus to trick me. That was in Season 2, Episode 15. And then in Season 4, Episode 16, you convinced a whole bunch of social studies teachers to join forces to try to dissolve me in acid.
Now, that wasn't real acid. I mean...
Aha, you do remember.
Hang on, my lawyers are advising me to respond. I do not recall.
You do not recall, but worse than that, last Christmas, you pretended to be my friend, Season 5, Episode 16, but it was really a ruse to give me an exploding smartwatch, which was finally delivered in Season 5, Episode 35, and it would have blown me up too if Emily, she graduated last year, if Emily hadn't gone back in time in Season 5, Episode 36, and saved me, or rather, if she hadn't quantum leaped, just like in the critically acclaimed classic sci-fi drama Quantum Leap, starring Scott Bakula that aired on NBC.
Okay, Corrigan, stop. I admit, some of my past behavior may have been less than charitable.
Less than charitable?
But I'm a changed man. I want to leave all that behind me. I think I'm ready to be friends again.
Really?
Really. It occurred to me that next week will be the 5th anniversary of the first episode of the Cristo Rey podcast.
Ooh, that's true. And to celebrate, we're going to have a special anniversary episode featuring a bunch of podcast hosts from the past. You don't want to miss it.
Sure. And thinking about it, it seemed like now was as good a time as ever to, say, finally bury the hatchet.
Well, the Bible does say love your enemies. And since you're my greatest enemy, I suppose by that logic, I have to love you most of all.
Yes, your theology is sound. You know, that phrase actually refers to settlements like the Haudenosaunee Confederacy's Great Law of Peace.
That's interesting.
Established sometime in the 16th or 17th century.
Okay, I forgive you, buddy.
Oh, this is great. You know, it reminds me of when John Adams and Thomas Jefferson finally reconciled their friendship 12 years after the bitter presidential election of 1800.
Actually, I can get behind this stuff.
Of course, they needed letters from fellow Declaration of Independence signer Benjamin Rush.
I knew that.
Progenitor of a lot of
good word.
Republican efforts at education to reach out. and help them reconcile. But we did this all on our own, and
just you and me,
and without declaring independence from anyone.
Wow, I couldn't have said it better myself. All this talk about friendship, it just sort of puts a song in your heart, doesn't it?
Oh wait, yeah, he's gonna sing again. Oh, I'm sure we're all shocked, right, listeners?
Well, since you bring it up, do you remember there was a song we sang on the podcast back in the old days?
I don't know.
Sure you do. Do you remember when we first sang it?
Oh, well, in that case, let me think. Yeah, sure, of course. Season 1, episode 6.
Like the wallpaper sticks to the wall.
Like the seashore clings to the sea.
Like you're never getting rid of your shadow, Mr. Deibel. Now
actually, that's Dr. Deibel to you.
Me.
Let all the others fight and fuss. Whatever happens, we've got us.
We're closer than pages that stick in a book. We're closer than ripples that play in a brook. Wherever you'll find him, you'll find me. Just look closer than a millennial to her bandwidth, or Kim Jong-un with his sandwich meat.
We're closer than smog is when it comes to LA. We're closer than Jay-Z is to Beyonce.
Ouch!
And not a soul can bust this team in two. We stick together like glue. And when it's sleeping time,
that's when we rise.
We start to swing.
Swing to the sky.
Our clocks don't chime.
What a surprise.
They ring.
A ding ding, Happy New Year.
Me.
And now to repeat what I said at the start.
I shall.
Don't need a large crowbar to break us apart. Oh, we're alone but far from the blue.
And before we get finished, we know this is true. We'll wander the hallways to pick up our crew. Gotta get Shoemaker and Mr. Wing too. Life is gonna be a wee wah wee.
Like the Constitutional Convention.